Hi, I am Kendall, this year's president of CRCBR. And September is Safety Awareness Month in our industry. And I'm excited today to be with Captain Bret Balamucki from the Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department. Thank you, Captain Balamucki, for agreeing to discuss safety for our members. One thing that's really important for our membership is to be able to provide, well, for CRCBR, is to provide our members with programming to keep safety top of mind. And I know with being in commercial real estate, we're in a lot of situations where we may feel like we're concerned with coming to a showing and someone might, like a homeless person might be there, or we may not know when we're going into a building, when we're turning on the lights, whether or not somebody's inside the building that we're not aware of. So before we get started with all of that safety, I would love to hear from you as to how you got to be in the Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department. Was it something that you grew up like your whole life knowing you wanted to be a police officer, or was this revelation one day? Like, how did you get to be a part of the police department?
I think that, thank you for having me. Really excited to talk to everybody today about safety tips that we can share. I think that, I had all my family had been in the military, and I was kind of in a toss-up. Do I join the military? Do I go to college? What do I want to do? So I ended up going to Central Piedmont. I got hired in the police department in '97. I was the only one in my entire academy class with an associate degree. Everybody had a 4-year degree at that time, and one guy had a master's degree. And we had a guy who I think had 6 years military, had just gotten out. So it was really hard to get on back then, but it was just a lifelong desire to serve, and just to really catch bad guys, have fun, help people, right, and just really kind of see what the job would do. And now we're 26 and a half years later, and coming towards the end of the career. So it's interesting. Great opportunities with the department. The department and the city help you go to school to finish your bachelor's degree and continuing education. So I think there's always opportunities once you're here, and then to explore different things that you want to do in the department.
Yeah, well, we're glad you're here. So thank you for your service. So getting back to safety, I know when I first started in the industry, I was an industrial broker. And at times I would have to go to empty buildings and unlock them, go in the dark with my flashlight before you had the iPhone flashlights, with my flashlight to find the breaker to turn it on. And there was always that concern that other people might be in the building, homeless people or somebody else might be in the building. What would you say to our members as to when you're coming to a building and you're showing it maybe for the first time, or you haven't been there in a while, or you're showing up with your actual prospect to go show the building, what are some safety precautions that we as brokers or property managers need to take when we're going to a building that may not always be occupied?
Yeah, I think like anything, right, it's an unknown, right? How long's it been empty? When's the last time someone's been in there? And I think it's always important to kind of do a drive-by to get a feel, to say, hey, is there cars abandoned? Are there people here on site that I don't know are going to be here? Mm-hmm. And follow your instinct, right? If something doesn't feel right, say something. Call your coworker or partner at work, and take someone with you if it's a larger property. I think it's always important, even if you could bring maintenance with you, to have to go through larger structures to help you navigate that safely. I know sometimes that's a little more difficult with scheduling, but I think it's always really important to put safety first, right? Mm-hmm. Not only for showing it, but also for the prospect that's looking at the property.
Right.
And it's important too that if you do see people hanging around on the property to call if they're not supposed to be there. I think we'll talk about it later in this talk, but it's very important to post things, have them secured, checking on them, and being consistent with that.
Now that's great, because it leads into my next question with the homeless. And so let's say you go up to your property and there's homeless people either in the stairwell or in the parking deck or in the doorway. I mean, what can we do to notify somebody? Like, who do we call? Or, just so that we try and have a better presentation when we're showing the space. What can we do?
I think the number one thing is, right, when you see someone, if they're not supposed to be there, because a lot of times we correlate that with homelessness or the people unhoused, but I think sometimes they're juveniles, there are people that are missing, there's somebody with mental health issues. We just don't know why they're on the property, right? And I think we always assume that person is somebody who doesn't have a home, but sometimes it could be someone that's up to no good and committing criminal stuff or trying to case an area or check, see what's happening with that. And I think that it's very important that you call CMPD or call 911 if you see someone who's trespassing, right? And let the operator know, hey, I've got somebody in the stairwell, they've entered illegally, I need the police to come out here. And even if you choose not to press charges on them, it's very important to be consistent with, banning the individual, right? So what we see uptown a lot is that people will come back to the same areas over and over again. They'll break a door a certain way, or they'll enter an area, they'll jump a fence, and then you get there and you have compassion. So you're like, hey, I just want them to leave. I don't want to do anything with it. But I think that for safety and for them to be able to push them towards resources, because some are resource resistant, right? They know the shelters are there. They know outreach providers. We have a CARES team now that's funded through the city with help of a state grant that has clinicians that go to these scenes. So if you were to call uptown or in the metro area right now for a subject sleeping in a stairwell, that team would be dispatched of clinicians to offer them resources, help, ride to the shelter, just try to look for a long-term solution. But I think that the biggest success we've had is for people to be consistent, right? If you see them and they're there and they're not supposed to be there, to ban them, but that has to be done in front of the police. It's done by the controller of the property, but in front of the officer, they'll give the numbers and say, hey, they're not supposed to, if you come back, there'll be a criminal charge. You could be criminally charged. And I think that consistency will help change that repeat behavior. So if you have areas that are constantly having issues, that's a good tip, right? But I think that you can always, if it's posted no trespassing and it's locked and secured, it's always best if you don't feel comfortable engaging the person, because the unknown part is, what state are they in? Right? Am I going to wake this person up that then suddenly, how are they going to react to me waking them up? And the frustrating part is sometimes it delays that showing because you're waiting on officers to arrive or resources. But I think that you should always put safety first.
So that leads me to the question where, who exactly do we call? Is it like a non-emergency number? And then how much notice, let's say we had a really big prospect flying in from out of state and we wanted to make sure we had a really good showing of Charlotte. And so we know in the past we'd have had people on the property that weren't supposed to be there. How much notice do we need to give to try and prevent from anybody being on the property when we do show up?
Yeah, I think that, the management would try to do that sweep, right? But for police, if somebody is located or there's a reason to believe somebody has broken in, you would just call 911 because you wouldn't want to use the non-emergency line. Now, if it's something that I know on Saturday and I think there's people living in there and I want to go through on Friday, that's something that I recommend that everyone go on cmpd.org, identify who your community coordinators are, and those are officers that are assigned geographically to certain areas, and they have great relationships with the businesses in the neighborhoods, and they kind of become the liaison for things, like this, long-term solutions, long-term problems, and that could be something that you could even coordinate with your community coordinator to say, hey, I think there's people sleeping in here, can you help me with that on this day? And a lot of times they'll just schedule that on their day and come through and check it to make sure everybody's safe.
Okay. So with these coordinators, let's say one's working one of the buildings that we lease and they're just doing a fantastic job. How do we recognize that officer and really promote them and make sure that the CMPD knows that they're doing a good job? Because I think it's important also to have that good relationship and be able to recognize when officers are really helpful. And
I tell you, I love to see those, right? Every week, the chain of command will get an email telling them, hey, this officer's commended for this. It only takes about 30 seconds and you go to cmpd.org. You can search internal affairs. When that link comes up, you click it. There's a link that says commend an officer.
Okay.
Or commend a police employee. Because a lot of times it's our civilian employees that get commended. It's got a quick little form you fill out online, hit submit. It goes through our internal affairs department. That sergeant routes it to the right chain of command. So no matter where you're at in the city, their chain of command would then know, hey, this officer here did a great job with this. We really appreciated it. Had a great impact. And a lot of times we'll spend time to complain about something, but not spend time to kind of say great work. And so I know that's always appreciated by our officers, because some divisions, right, when those come in, those get pushed out to the entire division. So now all the other employees of the division say, wow, did you see what such and such had written about them? If we're just doing a good job,
right.
Or making sure that we're trying to go above and beyond to keep people safe. And I think that's an easy route to kind of click, and it's the same website as you would to find your community coordinators.
Great, good to know. Very good to know. So leading into just overall safety, what are some recommendations that you would provide any of our members, just not only just showing space, but just overall safety when maybe previewing a client that's coming into town and you haven't met them before and you're meeting them on property, or screening those types of clients? Like, any general safety recommendations that you would give?
I think anytime you're meeting somebody new, right, that you just have to do your due diligence on trying to make sure that try to make sure that they followed the protocols, right, for safety. Always letting somebody know where you're at. Making sure that if your spidey sense tells you something doesn't feel right, don't ignore it, right? Because many times I think we'll notice things that are off or don't seem right, but you're like, it's okay. Hey, why doesn't this match when he said he was going to do this, but now he's got me calling this different phone number, or something different, right? That doesn't make you, kind of gives you that tickle. Follow through with that to be extra safe, right? Because I think just making sure that you don't put yourself in a situation that you can get hurt, right? And also putting your prospect in a situation of a business, right, that maybe isn't in a safe environment.
Right.
Not only from a criminal element, but from a mechanical failure or a water leak or something. So I think aware of your surroundings, right? Paying attention to, things, not showing things after dark if you can help it, right? Making sure that somebody knows where you're at. I know that sometimes people use their own trackers on their phones, and they're able to kind of track and keep track of each other. I've even seen where people will put their phone on and let it record on mute while they're speaking with somebody's listening live, right? But pepper spray is not a bad idea, on personal protection items. I think just whatever people decide to use, I think it's always a good idea to at least practice or train with it.
Right.
But I think that it's always just important just to really pay attention to your surroundings and don't put yourself in situations that can lead to putting yourself in harm's way.
Right. So there's been a lot of property damage recently, and I think it could be anything from homeless people using the properties and sleeping there to, as you mentioned earlier, just juveniles or people that are just up to no good. What is, if anything, can property owners do to either prevent it, or once it happens, what are the protocols of having it not happen again? Anything you can suggest?
I think that some of the successes that we've seen, especially uptown, right, is that power in partnerships. It's the accountability and power in partnerships. And what I'll explain what that is that several groups uptown have kind of come together to say, if you're going to commit crime, right, at this location, our neighboring property doesn't want you here either. So they will all come over if there's an arrest or the person's found on the property, and they'll ban them from the property because they had no legal right to be there.
Right.
So now you have a parking lot owner, a business owner, a different other business on the other corner all come together to say, we're not going to put up with criminal activity over here. And if you do decide to do it, we're going to all come together as partners and ban you from here so that if you do come over here again, there's a criminal leverage, right, on the accountability. Yeah. And I think just being consistent on accountability, right? I think a lot of times when we feel compassion, we don't want to press charges, right? I don't want to press charges. I'll just let them go. Well, then they realize I'm going to do it again. Or they could, right? Maybe they learn their lesson and don't do it again. But I think that accountability piece can kind of help curb that repeat chronic offenders versus maybe the one-time offender. And I think that that's judgment calls that everybody has to make. But I think documenting, right, photographs, calling us, you can do a report online, you can call 311, you can do it on the phone, you can do it on the internet through cmpd.org, you can actually fill out the report there, or you can have an officer respond if the person's still there. But it's really important to document it and be consistent.
Okay, yeah. So cybersecurity, that's an area that I think all of us, it's the unknown. It's, you know, what we don't know is probably what's going to hurt us. And so any new trends that are out there that us as commercial real estate, being in the commercial real estate industry, we need to be aware of or just be on the lookout for? Any trends out there?
Yeah, I think the biggest one, right, is phishing, the phishing. And that's the fake emails with attachments that have malware that get into the computer and then start to steal passwords. I think that's the biggest one that we see, right? And it's interesting because it's almost gotten me, right? Like I'll click my email and I'll be like, my Amazon order got readjusted.
Right.
And I click it and then I'm like, wait a minute. You know, and then I'll go onto the Amazon account and go, they haven't sent me anything.
Yeah.
And so, but I almost just entered my email and password to an account, right, or any account, and not using, you know, so I think that's a big one, right? Reporting it to your IT department if you find something suspicious, calling to verify, hey, did you send me this, right, before I just respond.
I do that with my husband. I'm like,
did you?
Yeah, did you log on to Wells Fargo and change something? He's like, no, it's...
yeah, because they get you, right? Because it's like, hey, you've had illegal activity, please log in to confirm.
Yes,
and it makes it urgent so that you react immediately, and now that it's on our phone, you can just do it so quickly. And so I think being aware of that, right? I think not using the same passwords, you know, is sometimes we all do it, right? Where you use the same password for everything, but then if it gets compromised, all of your stuff is now compromised. So just being aware, right? But I really do think the phishing is the thing that our cyber team said they see the most. Social media stuff, you know, people making fake accounts completely. And so just lots of different, you know, as technology grows, they get craftier and craftier on ways of trying to get into your systems, right? And you got to think a lot of times your telephone is a direct access to everything in your life. So it's keeping passwords on your cell phone, making sure that you don't leave it unsecured, making sure that you're always paying attention to where it is, and making sure that you know your passwords in the ability so that if it was lost or stolen, do I have the ability, one, to track it, and two, could I erase it remotely and then have everything already in the cloud? Because I think that a lot of times, especially with people at the large events, they'll lose them and then suddenly someone's using them immediately to purchase things because they were already signed into stuff.
Yeah.
So not really only, you know, showing properties, but also just overall that's something that we see. Because if you think about that, a lot of times your email's wide open on your phone through work, which then gives them access to all of your properties you're going to show, where you've been, different access to personal information.
So I know one of the new trends is, like today I parked in the parking lot across the street where you scan a QR code to be able to pay for your parking. And there's been talks of people putting stickers over QR. Have you been seeing that? And is that something that we need to be concerned with on QR codes that are becoming so popular all across the city? Like you see them everywhere. Yeah,
and I think that it's interesting because our yearly cyber training specifically talks about that. So as that trend has been going up, because it just gets easier and easier. We don't see a lot of that uptown yet.
That's good.
But I think that the access is there, right? And I think a lot of times too, people are a little reluctant of just public spaces using the QR code, but they also use it with the phishing emails, right? Like, hey, scan this QR code on an email, and then you do, and it, as technology advances, we're going to have to continue to just be aware of it.
Right.
But we haven't seen that as a trend, at least in the uptown area.
Okay. Well, the most important question of all is, how do you think the Panthers are going to do this year?
I hope they're going to win,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Take it all the way.
I hope so, right?
Yeah.
And I think that as we see the stadium get busier and busier and uptown and events and concerts, we just want people to really, if you see something, say something. That goes in properties all over the city, but also especially uptown, because it's all about just the power and partnerships, and I think getting to know personally a little bit your officers, your coordinators, your officers that work in your areas, it really goes a long way when you have questions or help, and then those partnerships between businesses around each other.
Yeah.
And that power of if one hotel suddenly now has that power to change kind of that criminal element in all of their hotels, it has strength in that. So we're excited about how the Panthers are going to do. We're excited about all the events coming uptown this whole fall, and we're excited to get some cooler weather, that's for sure.
Oh, definitely. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sitting down today, and I think this has been very helpful. And one takeaway that I am going away with is especially the partnership between all of us representing building owners and the CMPD, and working together to keep this city safe and strong. So really, thank you very much.
Thank you. I think it's going to be great to just expand the partnerships and continue to just bounce ideas. Right, the more we talk and communicate, the more we can make successful improvements. But thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.